The morning sun beat down on Fort Carson, Colorado, turning the parade ground into a sheet of white heat. Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the firing range, clipboard in hand, watching the new recruits fumble with their weapons. She wore no uniform, no insignia, no rank on her collar, just plain cargo pants and a faded gray polo shirt with the words civilian contractor stitched across the back. To the soldiers around her, she was nobody. "Hey, clipboard lady," one of the recruits called out, smirking. "You gonna actually teach us something or just stand there looking pretty?" A few others laughed. Sarah didn't respond. She'd heard worse. Much worse. She simply made a note on her paper and moved to the next station. Her job was to observe and report, not to engage, not to prove anything. Those days were behind her, but the whispers followed her everywhere. "Can you believe they hired her to evaluate us?" a staff sergeant muttered to his buddy as she walked past. "She's not even military anymore. Probably never even held a rifle." His friend chuckled. "Yeah, I heard she's just some admin washout. Probably got the job because of some diversity quota." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. She'd learned long ago that silence was sometimes the only armor that worked. Words didn't change minds. Not in a place like this. Not when you had no rank, no voice, no right to defend yourself. She had been at Fort Carson for 3 months now. 3 months of being invisible. 3 months of watching young soldiers train on the very ranges where she once set records. 3 months of biting her tongue, while men half as skilled questioned her presence. Her official title was Training Assessment Coordinator. It was a fancy way of saying she watched other people do the job she used to do better than anyone. She took notes, filed reports, made sure the range was safe and the protocols were followed. It was quiet work, unnoticed work, exactly what she'd asked for. After the incident, after everything that happened overseas, Sarah had requested a discharge. Not a dishonorable one, not even a medical one, though God knows she could have claimed PTSD and no one would have questioned it. She just wanted out, away from the noise, the expectations, the weight of a uniform that had once meant everything to her. The Army let her go. But they also made her an offer. Come back as a civilian contractor. Use your experience. Help train the next generation. It's easy work, they said. Low stress, no command responsibility. Just observe and report. She'd taken it because she didn't know what else to do. Because rent wasn't free and her savings were running dry. Because some part of her still needed to be near the world she'd left behind, even if she could only watch it from the sidelines now. But nobody here knew who she was. Nobody knew what she'd done. Her file was classified, her record sealed. As far as Fort Carson was concerned, Sarah Mitchell was just another civilian hire with a mysterious background and no business being on an active military base. "Ms. Mitchell." She turned to see Captain Brad Townsend striding toward her, his expression already impatient. He was the officer in charge of this training unit, mid-30s, confident, the kind of man who believed his rank made him smarter than everyone in the room. He'd made it clear from day one that he didn't like having a civilian, especially a female, civilian, and evaluating his soldiers. "Yes, Captain?" Sarah kept her voice even. "I need your report from yesterday's exercises by end of day." His tone was clipped. "And try to keep your observations relevant this time. I don't need a novel about trigger discipline. These men know what they're doing." "Understood," she said simply. He looked at her like he wanted to say more, like he wanted to put her in her place even further. But instead he just shook his head and walked away, muttering something under his breath. Sarah exhaled slowly. She glanced down at her clipboard, at the notes she'd taken, the mistakes she'd observed, the safety violations that could get someone killed in a real combat situation, but none of it mattered. Because she had no rank, no authority, no voice that anyone wanted to hear. She finished her rounds and headed back to the small office they'd given her. It was barely more than a storage closet with a desk and a computer. The walls were bare except for a faded map of Afghanistan that someone had left behind. Sarah sat down and opened her laptop. She began typing her report, keeping it short and technical just like the captain wanted. No commentary, no suggestions, just facts. But as she typed, her eyes drifted to the corner of the desk. There, tucked under a stack of folders, was a small photograph. The only personal item she'd brought with her. It showed a younger version of herself, leaner, harder. wearing full combat gear and standing in the desert sun. In her hands was a rifle, a very specific rifle, the kind that only the best were trusted to carry. In that photo, she wasn't nobody. In that photo, she was Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, Marine Corps Scout Sniper, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 47 confirmed kills, the second highest record in her entire battalion, and the highest of any woman in Marine Corps history at the time. But that was another life. Another person. She'd walked away from that world and all the ghosts that came with it. She'd buried her medals in a box somewhere and traded her rifle for a clipboard. Now she was just the quiet woman no one respected, the contractor no one listened to, the invisible observer everyone assumed knew nothing, and she'd made peace with that, or at least, she thought she had, until the day everything changed. It started with a phone call. Sarah was in her office late that afternoon when her cell rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Is this Sarah Mitchell?" a man's voice asked. "Who's asking?" "Colonel James Harrington. I'm with the Department of Defense. I need to speak with you in person. Tomorrow, 0800 hours. It's about your record." Her blood went cold. "My record is sealed." "I know. That's why we need to talk." The line went dead. Sarah sat in the silence of her tiny office, her heart pounding. Nobody was supposed to know. That was the deal. She could leave. Start over. Disappear into civilian life. As long as she never spoke about what she'd done, what she'd seen, what she'd survived. But now someone was asking questions, and tomorrow she'd have to face whatever came next. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat in her small apartment staring at the wall, replaying the colonel's words over and over. "It's about your record." What did that mean? Was she in trouble? Had someone found out about the classified missions? About the operation that ended her career? By the time the sun rose, she'd drunk 4 cups of coffee and convinced herself a dozen different scenarios. None of them good. At 0750 hours, she stood outside the base command building, her hands shoved in her pockets, trying to look calmer than she felt. The building was imposing, brick and glass, flags snapping in the wind. This was where the real decisions were made, where officers with stars on their shoulders decided the fate of soldiers. She hadn't been inside since her initial contractor. Orientation. Ms. Mitchell, she turned to see a man in his 50s approaching. Silver hair, sharp uniform. The eagles on his collar told her this was Colonel Harrington. "Sir." She straightened instinctively, old habits kicking in. "Walk with me." He didn't wait for a response. He headed toward a side entrance and Sarah followed. They walked through quiet hallways until they reached a small conference room. He closed the door behind them. "Sit." She sat. He remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment he just looked at her, evaluating, measuring. "Do you know why you're here?" he finally asked. "No, sir." 3 days ago, the Department of Defense received a request from Fort Carson's command. They want to send a team to a national sniper competition. Inner service, high profile. The Army wants to win. He paused. But they need someone to coach the team. Someone with real experience. Someone with a record that speaks for itself. Sarah's stomach twisted. She knew where this was going. "Your name came up," Harrington continued. "When we ran a search for the best sniper records in recent history, you were near the top of the list. But your file is locked, classified. That made people curious." "I'm not active duty anymore," Sarah said carefully. "I'm a contractor. I observe. I don't train. I'm aware." He leaned against the table. "But here's the situation. Fort Carson's current sniper instructor is good, competent. But he doesn't have a combat record like yours. The command staff doesn't know that, of course. They don't know who you are. But I do. Sir, with respect, I left that life behind. I'm not interested in—" "I'm not asking you to re-enlist," Harrington interrupted. "I'm asking you to do your job. You're a training assessor. This is training. The competition is in 6 weeks. The team needs a coach who knows what they're doing. Someone who's been in the field. Someone who's made the shots that matter." Sarah shook her head. "They won't listen to me. I'm a civilian. I'm a woman. Half the men on this base think I'm a secretary. Then prove them wrong. I don't need to prove anything to anyone." Harrington studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out a folder and set it on the table. He opened it. Inside were photographs. Mission reports. Her reports. 47 confirmed kills, he said quietly, including a shot at 200 meters in high wind that saved an entire platoon. You held a position for 11 hours under enemy fire in Kandahar. You trained 3 of the Marine Corps' current top snipers. You were recommended for a Silver Star. I didn't get it, Sarah said flatly, because the mission was classified. But that doesn't erase what you did. He closed the folder. You're one of the best this country has ever produced. And right now you're wasting that talent watching kids miss targets on a basic range. That's my choice, is it? Harrington's voice softened. Or are you just hiding? The words hit harder than she expected. Sarah looked away, her throat tight. I'm not trying to force you, the colonel said, but I am asking. This base needs you. Those soldiers need you, whether they know it or not. And if I say no, then you say no. You go back to your clipboard, and nothing changes. Harrington left the folder on the table and walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, Ms. Mitchell, I read the full report on what happened to you in Afghanistan. What you went through. What you lost. I understand why you walked away. He looked back at her. But I also know that warriors like you don't stop being warriors just because you take off the uniform. It's in your blood. And sooner or later you're going to have to decide if you're going to let fear keep you silent, or if you're going to let your skills speak for you. He left. Sarah sat alone in the conference room, staring at the folder. Slowly, she reached out and opened it again. Her own face looked back at her from an old ID photo. Younger, fiercer, unbroken. She closed the folder and stood. Her hands were shaking. For 3 months she'd been invisible, safe, unnoticed, but also voiceless, powerless, watching others make mistakes she could fix, biting her tongue while men who didn't know half of what she knew dismissed her as irrelevant. And maybe Harrington was right. Maybe she was hiding, but stepping back into that world meant risking everything. It meant facing the judgment, the doubt, the inevitable pushback from men who wouldn't believe a woman could be better than them. It meant opening wounds she'd worked so hard to close, but it also meant finally, using her voice again, Sarah took a deep breath. Then she walked out of the conference room and headed straight for the training command office. Captain O. Townsend looked up in surprise when she entered. Ms. Mitchell, I'm coaching the sniper team for the national competition, she said firmly. He blinked. Excuse me? You need a coach. I'm volunteering. Townsend leaned back in his chair, a smirk creeping across his face. You coach a sniper team? Yes, he laughed. Actually laughed. Ms. Mitchell, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but this is a serious competition. We need someone with real experience, someone who's actually been a sniper, not a contractor who takes notes. I am a sniper, Sarah said. Really? His tone was dripping with condescension. And where exactly did you serve? That's classified. Oh, of course it is, he shook his head. Look, I don't know what you think you're qualified to do, but this isn't some basic training course. This is the best of the best. We're competing against special forces, SEAL teams, Marine Scout snipers. We need someone who can actually— I was a Marine Scout sniper, Sarah interrupted. 3 tours, 47 confirmed kills. I held the female record for distance and accuracy in active combat. I've trained instructors. I've made shots in conditions you've only read about. And I'm offering to help your team win. The room went silent. Townsend stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. Then his expression shifted. Not to respect, to suspicion. If that's true, why are you here as a contractor? Why aren't you still active duty? That's not relevant. It is if you want me to trust you with my soldiers. Sarah's jaw tightened. I left for personal reasons. My record stands on its own. So you say. Townsend stood up. But I'm not putting my team in the hands of someone with a mysterious past and no proof. If you were really as good as you claim, someone would know about it. But no one does. Which tells me you're either lying or you washed out. I didn't wash out. Then prove it. My file is classified. I can't. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Townsend walked to the door and opened it. I appreciate the offer, Ms. Mitchell, but I need someone credible, not someone chasing glory they never earned. Sarah stood there, her heart pounding, her fists clenched. Every instinct screamed at her to fight back, to make him see, to demand respect, but she had no rank, no authority, no voice that mattered here. So she turned and walked out, and the door closed behind her. 2 weeks passed, 2 weeks of whispers and sideways glances. Word had spread about Sarah's claim, about the confrontation with Captain Townsend. Some soldiers laughed it off. Others were curious, but most just saw it as proof that she didn't belong. "Did you hear the contractor thinks she's some kind of war hero?" one recruit joked in the mess hall. "Yeah, right. Probably never left a desk." Sarah heard it all, and she said nothing. She went back to her clipboard. Her observations. Her invisible role. Because what else could she do? But something had changed inside her. A spark had been lit, one she couldn't quite put out. She started staying late at the range. After hours, when no one was around, she'd check out a rifle from the civilian contractor equipment locker. Nothing fancy, just a standard M4, and she'd shoot. At first, it felt strange. The weight of the rifle, the smell of gunpowder, the focus required to line up a shot. It had been over a year since she'd fired a weapon. Her hands shook the first few rounds, but then the muscle memory returned. The breathing, the stance, the calm that settled over her mind when everything else fell away, and there was only the target, the wind, and the shot. She started hitting center mass, then tighter groupings. Then she moved the targets further back, 300 meters, 400, 500. Every shot found its mark. It felt like coming home. One evening, as she was packing up, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see a young soldier standing at the edge of the range. Private First Class Emma Torres, early 20s. Nervous energy. Sarah had seen her around the base. She was one of the few women in the sniper training program. "Ms. Mitchell?" Torres asked hesitantly. "Yes? I heard what you said. To Captain Townsend, about being a sniper." Sarah waited. "Is it true?" For a moment, Sarah considered brushing her off, keeping the walls up. But there was something in the young woman's eyes. Hope, maybe, or desperation. "Yes," Sarah said quietly. "It's true." Torres stepped closer. "Then why doesn't anyone believe you?" "Because I have no way to prove it. And because some people don't want to believe a woman can do what I've done." Torres nodded slowly. "I know that feeling." Sarah studied her. "You're in the sniper program. Barely. They let me in because they had to. Diversity initiative. But no one takes me seriously. They give me the worst equipment. Rush me through drills. I'm failing, and I don't think they care. Do you care?" "Yes." Torres's voice was fierce. "I want this more than anything. But I don't know how to get better when no one will actually teach me." Sarah saw herself in this young woman. The determination, the frustration, the weight of being underestimated every single day. "Show me your stance," Sarah said. Torres blinked. "What? Your shooting stance?" "Show me." Torres quickly moved to the firing line and shouldered an imaginary rifle. Sarah walked around her, observing. She immediately saw a dozen small mistakes. Foot position, shoulder tension, breathing rhythm. "Your left foot is too far forward," Sarah said. "It's throwing off your balance. And you're holding tension in your neck. That'll affect your sight picture." Torres adjusted. "Better. Now when you breathe, don't hold it. Let it flow. Find the natural pause between breaths. That's when you shoot." They worked together for an hour. Sarah gave corrections, demonstrations, tips she'd learned in the field, and Torres absorbed every word like she was dying of thirst. When they finally stopped, Torres looked at her with something close to awe. "You really do know what you're doing." "I told you." Will you help me?" Torres asked. "I know you're not officially allowed to train us, but maybe off the record? I'll do whatever it takes. I just need someone who actually believes I can do this." Sarah hesitated. This was exactly what she'd been avoiding. Getting involved, caring, opening herself up to the possibility of failure, or worse, success, but she looked at Torres and saw herself 10 years ago. Hungry, determined, desperate for someone to give her a chance. "Okay," Sarah said. "But we do this before dawn, before anyone else is here. And you don't tell anyone who's training you." Torres grinned. "Yes, ma'am." They shook hands. And for the first time in months, Sarah felt like she had a purpose again. Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah and Torres met every morning at 500. They ran drills, practiced breathing techniques, worked on distance shots and wind calculations. Torres improved rapidly. Her groupings tightened. Her confidence grew, but they kept it quiet, secret, because Sarah knew the moment Captain Townsend found out, he'd shut it down. Then, one morning, everything came to a head. Sarah arrived at the range to find Torres already there. But she wasn't alone. 3 other soldiers stood with her, 2 men and another woman, all part of the sniper program. "Ms. Mitchell," Torres said quickly. "I know you said to keep it quiet, but these guys are struggling too. Townsend's barely teaching us anything useful. I told them you could help, please." Sarah looked at the group. They were young, eager, and clearly desperate. "If Townsend finds out—" "He won't," one of the men said. "We need this. We're getting destroyed in qualifications. If we don't improve, we're out of the program." Sarah sighed. Then she nodded. "Fine, but we work fast. And if anyone asks, you're here on your own initiative. I'm just observing." They agreed. For the next 2 weeks, Sarah trained them. Really trained them. She taught them everything she knew. The technical skills, the mental discipline, the instincts that only came from real combat experience, and they got better. Noticeably better. So much better that Captain Townsend noticed. He showed up at the range one afternoon, arms crossed, watching the team run through drills. His expression was unreadable. When the session ended, he approached Sarah. "What's going on here, Ms. Mitchell?" "Training," she said simply. "I didn't authorize you to train anyone. They asked for help. I'm a contractor with sniper experience. I helped." His eyes narrowed. "You've been coaching my team behind my back. Your team was failing. Now they're not." Townsend's face flushed with anger. "You have no authority here, no rank. No business undermining my command." "I'm not undermining anything. I'm doing my job. Training assessment. I assessed that they needed better training. So I provided it. You provided nothing." Townsend snapped. "You're a civilian with delusions of grandeur. And as of right now, you're banned from this range during training hours." "Sir?" Torres started to protest. "That's an order, Private." The soldiers fell silent. Sarah met Townsend's glare without flinching. "You can ban me from the range," Sarah said quietly, "but you can't erase what I've taught them. And when they outperform every other team at that competition, you'll know exactly why." Townsend stepped closer, his voice low and venomous. "You think you're special. You think you're some kind of hero. But you're nothing. Just another washed-up has-been trying to relive the glory days." He smiled coldly. "If you were really as good as you claim, you'd still be in uniform. But you're not, which tells me everything I need to know." He turned and walked away. Sarah stood there, her chest tight, her hands shaking. Not from fear, from rage, from frustration, from the weight of being silenced yet again. But then Torres stepped forward. "He's wrong," she said firmly. "You're the best instructor I've ever had, and we're going to prove it." The others nodded in agreement. And in that moment, Sarah realized something. She might not have rank. She might not have a voice that the officers respected, but she had something more powerful. She had students who believed in her, and that would have to be enough. The day of the National Inter-Service Sniper Competition arrived like a storm on the horizon. Fort Benning, Georgia. The most prestigious shooting event in the military. Teams from every branch gathered to prove who had the best marksmen in the country. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Special Forces units, SEAL teams. The best of the best, Fort Carson sent their team. 5 soldiers, including Private Torres. Captain Townsend went as their official coach, though everyone knew who had really prepared them. Sarah wasn't invited. She watched them leave from her office window, a dull ache in her chest. She'd done everything she could, taught them everything she knew, but now it was out of her hands. She went back to her regular duties, observing ranges, filing reports, being invisible. But 3 days later, her phone rang. It was Torres. "Ms. Mitchell, you need to get down here." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's—" "Just trust me. Colonel Harrington arranged transport. There's a flight leaving in 2 hours. Please come." "Torres, I can't just— please." Something in her voice made Sarah agree. She made the flight, arrived at Fort Benning that evening. Torres met her outside the main competition building, her face flushed with excitement. "What's going on?" Sarah asked. "You'll see. Come on." Torres led her inside. The building was massive. Crowds of soldiers, families, officials, screens showing live feeds of the competition ranges, scoreboards tracking each team's performance. And there, on the main board, Sarah saw it. Fort Carson was in second place, only 3 points behind the leading team. "The Marine Corps Scout Sniper School. You're in second?" Sarah breathed. "We were in 5th yesterday," Torres said, grinning. "But we've been climbing. Everything you taught us, it's working. We're actually competing. Sarah felt a surge of pride. That's incredible. There's more. Torres pulled her toward a side hallway. The final event is tomorrow. Long-range precision shooting. Unknown distance. Wind variables. It's the hardest challenge, and it's worth double points. So if you perform well, we could win. Torres stopped and turned to face her. But here's the thing. Each team is allowed to enter one coach into a special exhibition shoot. It's not part of the official competition, but it's tradition. The best shot from each coaching staff competes. Bragging rights, legacy. Townsend was supposed to do it. Was? Torres's smile widened. He withdrew. Said he had a conflict. But before he did, I told the event coordinator that Fort Carson had another coach. One with a record that deserved to be seen. I gave them your name. Sarah's heart stopped. Torres, no. I can't. You can. And you should. Torres grabbed her hands. You've been silent for too long. You've let people dismiss you, mock you, erase you. But tomorrow you have a chance to show everyone who you really are. Not with words. With action. I'm not active duty. I'm not official. Colonel Harrington cleared it. You're listed as a civilian contractor, coach. It's allowed. The only question is whether you'll do it. Sarah's mind raced. Every instinct told her to refuse. To stay invisible. To avoid the risk of failure. Or worse, the risk of success and everything that might come with it. But then she thought of every dismissive comment. Every mocking laugh. Every time someone had told her she was nobody. What's the distance? Sarah asked quietly. 1,000 meters. 3 shots timed, wind is unpredictable. Only 2 people have ever hit perfect center on all 3 in the history of this event. Sarah took a deep breath. Then she nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Torres let out a whoop of joy. The next morning, Sarah stood at the firing line with 11 other shooters. All men, all active duty, most with impressive ranks and records. They eyed her with curiosity and skepticism. Who's the civilian? One of them muttered. Some contractor from Fort Carson. Probably a publicity stunt. Sarah ignored them. She checked her rifle, a standard-issue M110. Not her preferred weapon, but it would do. She studied the wind flags downrange, felt the air, calculated the variables. The range officer gave the safety brief. Then the command. Shooters, take your positions. Sarah settled into her stance. The familiar calm washed over her. Everything else faded away. The crowd, the whispers, the doubt. There was only the target. The wind and the shot. Begin. She fired. The first round cut through the air. 1,000 meters downrange, it struck the target. 2 inches left of center, she adjusted. Breathed. Fired again. Dead center. One more shot. She felt the wind shift slightly. Compensated, squeezed the trigger. Dead center. 3 shots. 2 perfect. 1 near perfect. Around her, the other shooters finished. Some hit the target. Some missed entirely. But when the scores were tallied and displayed on the board, Sarah's name was at the top. First place. The crowd murmured. Officials checked the results twice, but the numbers didn't lie. Then someone in the crowd shouted, "Who is she?" The range officer looked at his roster. Sarah Mitchell. Civilian contractor. Fort Carson. Civilian. Another voice called. How does a civilian outshoot special forces? Colonel Harrington stepped forward. He'd been watching from the sidelines. Now he moved to the microphone at the announcer's table. I can answer that, he said. His voice carried across the range. Ms. Mitchell isn't just a civilian contractor. She's former Marine Corps, scout sniper, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 47 confirmed kills, second highest record in her battalion. At one point, she held the record for longest range combat kill by a female Marine. 1,200 meters, high wind. Under fire. The crowd went silent. She trained some of the instructors in this room, Harrington continued. She saved lives, completed missions most of us can't imagine, and when she left active duty, she did so with honor and distinction. But because her service was largely classified, most people don't know her name. They don't know what she's done. They see a woman with no rank and assume she has no skill. He looked directly at Sarah, but today she let her record speak for itself. The silence broke into applause, slowly at first, then louder. Soldiers who had dismissed her minutes ago were clapping. Some were standing. Sarah stood at the firing line, her throat tight, her eyes burning. She hadn't cried in years, but she felt close now. Then Torres ran onto the range and threw her arms around her. You did it. You actually did it. The other Fort Carson team members followed, all of them grinning, cheering, and in the back of the crowd Sarah saw Captain Townsend. He wasn't clapping, but he was watching, and for the first time, there was something like respect in his eyes. The final event concluded that afternoon. Fort Carson's team performed brilliantly. Torres hit a perfect score on her long-range shot. The others followed suit. When the final scores were posted, Fort Carson had won, first place overall. The trophy ceremony was held that evening. The team stood on the platform, medals around their necks, holding the championship trophy. And when the announcer asked who had coached them, Torres grabbed the microphone. Our coach is Her Mitchell, she said loudly. And she's the reason we're here. The crowd erupted again. And this time Sarah walked onto the platform. Not as a shadow, not as a silent observer, but as the coach. The mentor, the sniper whose record had finally silenced the room. Later, as the sun set over Fort Benning, Colonel Harrington approached her. Hell of a shot today, he said. Thank you, sir. I have a question for you. He handed her a folder. How would you feel about coming back? Not as a contractor, as an instructor. Official position. Teaching the next generation of snipers. Your record would be declassified. Your name would be on the roster. You'd have rank, authority, a voice. Sarah looked at the folder, then at the team celebrating nearby, at Torres, who was laughing with her teammates, at the trophy that bore Fort Carson's name. For so long, she'd believed that silence was safety. That invisibility was peace, but she'd been wrong. Her voice mattered. Her skills mattered. And the people she could teach and inspire mattered. Yes, sir, she said. I'd like that. Harrington smiled. Welcome back, Sergeant Mitchell. And for the first time in over a year, Sarah felt like herself again. She had no rank when she started, no voice that anyone wanted to hear, but her sniper record had silenced the room, and now finally people were ready to listen.